The next definition is door edge when it comes to clearance, and there's always going to be a margin between the edge of the door and whatever it's next to, typically a jamb, maybe the edge of another door. It could be the distance from the top of the door to the underside of the transom bar or the header, things of that nature. So let's switch to the screen view and let's take a little closer look at the SDI definition. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. So here's the next definition, door edge. Under clearance, we're dealing with door edge. Door edge, the distance between either the edge of the door and the frame rabbet, yes, or the edges of two doors of a pair. Okay, the distance between either the edge of the door and a frame rabbet. So this right here is called the rabbet. If you were to take a door edge, a door like this, and you were to rabbet the edge to make it look like this, that's a rabbeted edge. So if you took this sort of concept and you basically got rid of this and got rid of this, you would be left with this. And that kind of looks like the frame. So right there is the rabbet. Okay. That's the rabbet. Rabbets are typically 1 15/16 for 1 3/4 thick doors on hollow metal frames, or they're 1 9/16 for 1 3/8 thick doors on hollow metal frames. And you'll have some manufacturers like Kiwani once upon a time when they were in business, and they were for decades, their standard was always unequal rabbet, and what that always meant, what that does mean, is this. Unequal rabbet means that you have a frame that's 1 15 here and 1 9 here. That's so that Kiwani can toss 1 3/4 or 1 3/8. And Kiwani always was a company, certainly in the 60s and 70s, because they were a couple 3 hours outside of Chicago. Chicago certainly would have been their biggest market. They did a lot of projects, jobs that would be apartment buildings where you're going to have odd height doors, like literally 7'4", 1 3/8. They're doing 3.5-inch hinges on 1 3/8 hollow core wood doors. Knocked down, well, they would have been masonry frames, basically welded masonry frames. So for Kiwani, unequal rabbet would be very typical. If you look at Seco, let's take a look and see if we can find something Seco. And as we pull up the Seco catalog, we'll look at just this old product catalog I have. It just simply doesn't matter how old it is because really nothing's changed. And I want to scroll to it. It'll be in their frame section of this abbreviated catalog somewhere. Yeah. So they literally have a different part number for unequal and equal. So yeah, okay. Actually, that's an awful example. They have different part numbers for D and E. Yeah, here it is. So let's take a look. Well, what I was expecting to see is on the SQ, SU. Okay, so they're really not telling us clearly, but the SQ is going to be an equal rabbet frame, and we can kind of see that here on the drywall style, where DR versus DU. A DR, that's still a bad example. You'll have to take my word for it that an SU is going to be an unequal. So if you order an SU, it's going to be unequal rabbet. If you order SQ, it's going to be equal rabbet. That's just what it is. So they literally have a different part number for equal or unequal rabbet, and I would think that that's got everything to do with not unlike the same type of experience that Kiwani has, where Seco, when they were in Illinois in the 1950s, probably in the 1960s, they would have been the champions of supplying those apartment buildings and the high-rise, the 30, 40, 50-story apartment buildings along Lakeshore Drive, basically, in Chicago. There would have been tons of those supplied. So equal or unequal rabbet is what it's going to be. So that's going to be the rabbet. Now, this this talk is literally about the gap or the door edge clearance. It's going to be either 1/8 of an inch or it's going to be 3/32. And 3/32 comes in if you have doors that are, let's say, 35 and 13/16, that's 3/16. 3/16 divided by 2 is 3/32. Okay? Or it's going to be 1/8 of an inch. If you've got beveled edge doors, you can expect it to be about 3/32. That's going to work perfectly. If you've got square edge doors, you can expect that's going to be 1/8 of an inch. And that's also going to apply at the header, between the top of the door and the underside of the head, or the transom bar, or whatever it might be. Now, the tricky thing is between the two doors, you really want to tighten that up as much as possible. But that clearance door edge, or the edges of two doors of a pair, well, that gets a little tricky when you're dealing with a pair of doors and a distributor like us who has stock items. So if you stock square edge doors, this gap, this door edge, that's going to be 1/4 inch. That's no good. 35 3/4 times 2, 71 1/2 minus 1/8, minus 1/8, 71 3/4, that leaves 1/4 here. So you don't really want that. That's a huge gap. Someone will notice that. Now that's okay if you're going to add an astragal, you're going to do something like that, or if you've got maybe surface or split gasketing, split astragals like weather stripping, but that gap could get to be 1/4 inch really quick. Now if you're dealing with doors that are 35 and 13, that's okay, but you're really not, you're only picking up an extra 1/16 of an inch. You'll still have 3/16 between the two doors. So you've got to think about that door edge clearance when you're dealing with standard stock doors. You want that, especially if you're going to be able to see that in elevation. If you're going to have a door here and you're going to have a door here, that's awful. You're going to want this to be, I should really do this a little bit better. You're going to want that margin to be the same all the way across. What you see here, what you see here, what you see here. You don't want to have small margin, giant margin, small margin, or normal, normal, and giant. So yeah, you'll want to be mindful about that. It's really important to state that the door edge clearance can really never be less than the prescribed dimension. And that comes into play when you have an existing frame and you're replacing the door only. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. You know, there's a lot to be said about door edges, and where I was going just previously was it can't be too small or the door's not going to swing correct. Getting into you've got an existing frame, you're putting in a new door. There really are no existing frames that are still 36 wide, so it could be that you would really need a door that's like 35 and 13/16. Pardon me. You'd really need a door that's like 35 and 5/8, 35 and 11/16, because, you know, what used to be absolutely square and plumb is now, if I was going to exaggerate it, is kind of now like this. You know what I mean? So you really need something smaller, because this is the problem. This is okay, but the building is settled and it's put stress on the frame. So having a minimum margin is mandatory, or the door won't swing freely. It'll make contact because it's a steel door. You're not going to put a planer on the edge of it. Can you grind off a 32nd? Yep, you can put a grinder on the edge of that door and take off the metal. That's just not the right way to do it. So door edge clearance is really important to understand what it is, what it must be. Too little is a problem, too much is a problem, and that's what it is. Let's move on to the next definition. Frame installation, budding wall clearance. Yeah, we'll talk about that next. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.